All right, so I think we're gonna go ahead and kick it off. It's 2 o'clock now, and more people will join. So thank you all for joining this webinar by the National Science Policy Network. My name is Dane, and this particular webinar panel is entitled Charting a Course, Navigating Careers for Underrepresented Scientists. And if you're tweeting about this, you can use the hashtags SciPol webinars and diversity. And as I mentioned, this webinar is brought to you by the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee at the National Science Policy Network, which is a collection of graduate students, postdocs, anyone in the STEM fields who's interested in science policy. And your moderator for this webinar today is Dr. Nicole Cabrera Salazar, and you can reach her at these following social media handles. And these are panels today, and as well as their contact info. Nicole, if you'd like to kick it off.
Sure, thank you. My social media handles are misspelled, but that's okay. We can figure that out later. But thanks everybody. Happy Black History Month. And like Dane said, my name is Dr. Nicole Cabrera Salazar. Coming at you live from my parents' house. I promise this is not my bedroom with a Moana poster in the back. This is my mom's like sewing room slash a room for my niece when she comes to visit. So hence the butterfly motifs in the back. But yes, so I'm a PhD in astronomy. Oh, by the way, my pronouns are she, her, or ella. I'm gonna ask the panelists to say your names and pronouns and what you're doing in a minute. But just to introduce myself, I got my PhD in astronomy a couple of years ago, and I decided to leave my field because it was such a toxic environment for me. I decided to leave in around the 4th year of graduate school, and then I had a couple more years to finish up my PhD. And during that time, I did a lot of, I went to see a career counselor. I was seeing her for about 2 or 3 years. And that really helped me shift into the career that I'm in now, which is consulting. And so about a year after I graduated, I started my company, Movement Consulting. And what I do is that I help people in science and technology, science and tech organizations, university departments, change their culture so that marginalized people can thrive there. Because the number one reason we know through research, and a lot of analysis, that the number one reason that marginalized people leave STEM is because of a toxic workplace environment. And so, so I do a lot of trainings and facilitation and workshops and stuff to make sure that doesn't happen to other people. So, but I'd love to introduce, we have a really great panel today. So I'm just gonna go in the order that, that Zoom is showing me here. First we have Dr. Rhonda Charles. Rhonda, would you like to give the people your name, your pronouns, and also where you are in your career right now?
Okay, great. Hi everyone, I'm Rhonda Charles. My pronouns are she and her. And my current position is as a scientific director as a medical communications company called Chameleon, which is one of the group companies under Healthcare Consultancy Group and the Omnicom Health Group. So since leaving my PhD in 2013 from Mount Sinai, I joined this company. And so that was quite some time ago, and I'm still there. So I've worked my way up the ranks and experienced many different facets that a person entering medical communications will experience. And there's still more to go, obviously. In my role as a scientific director, I work with many different people. I'm a manager as well as a mentor to several folks at many different levels. Not only do I work with PhDs, but I also work with folks who are coming straight out of college or maybe have a master's in public health or interested in healthcare in general and are doing more of the client-facing side. So generally what we do is we our clients are pharmaceutical companies, and we help them to communicate their science appropriately, accurately, and with the kind of impact that they would like. So you know, we really figure out who the clients are trying to reach, their different audiences, and then come up with creative and innovative solutions for them on exactly how they should be communicating their science, all within, obviously, the confines of the regulatory system. So, you know, that's an important consideration. We have we usually get a lot of experience in many different treatment areas, and the position requires you really to jump into different areas and learn quickly about it, and then able to advise your clients appropriately. So that's a bit of my background, and you know, I'm sure we'll get more into it later on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rhonda. I definitely feel your pain about every client is different and you have to kind of like have that relationship. So next we have Dr. Tepring Kuato. Tepring, would you like to give us your name, pronouns, and where you are in your career?
Sure, thank you. So yes, Dr. Depring Kuato, she, her. I actually have crafted out the career of my dreams. So generally my title is neuroscientist or scientist, but I teach at a graduate program called Party Rand Graduate School, and I'm a professor. I also am a research scientist focused on policy at Rand Corporation. So there I am a research scientist. And then I also, my third hat is for a nonprofit called California Issues Forum. I just had my 1-year anniversary working with that organization on February 1st. And there I have my title as Chief Policy Director, where I give advice and guidance and really strengthen our California State Legislature through science and analysis. So I have 3 different aspects of my career that I've crafted out since graduating in 2010. I do a variety of things that you can imagine professors do, which is, you know, teaching and grading and mentoring. And I also wear the hat of IDEA, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, Advancement Advisor for the grad school. And I'm also their mentor, first-year mentor coordinator. In my RAND research, I have a portfolio of work that looks at traumatic brain injury, knowledge, skills, and abilities that physicians need to have quality of care for service members that are experiencing concussion and traumatic brain injury, and also putting together a variety of proposals, including one right now on evidence maps for genetic sequencing. And we'll probably get into a little more about our career path as we develop today. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tepring. Okay, Tracy, would you like to give us your name, your pronouns, and where you're at in your career?
Sure. Hello, my name is Tracey Johnson. I'm a professor in, my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a professor at the UCLA in the Department of Molecular, Cell, and Developmental Biology. And so I think there, as a faculty member, as a professor, I think there's a sense that there are many things that we're all, as people who've gone through or are going through the PhD process, kind of have a sense of what that is. But like I think all of the other panelists, I wear a number of hats. I'm also an associate dean in the life sciences, and I'm also the chair and director of a couple of different programs. One is the biomedical research minor here at UCLA, and director of a program to support early exposure to research for undergraduates, particularly those underrepresented in the sciences, a program called the Pathways to Success program. And I'm also heavily involved in the broader conversations about teaching undergraduate education, and that's through my relationships with particularly the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, where I'm an HHMI professor and a member of their executive board. And so those are some of the different things that I'm interested in, and look forward to this conversation today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tracy. All right, last but not least, we have Irene. Irene, would you like to tell us your name and your pronouns and where you are in your career?
Sorry. Hi, everybody. My name is Irene Jarchum. My pronouns are she, her. And I am currently a senior editor at Nature Biotechnology. I got my PhD in immunology and then did a 3-year postdoc also in immunology, studying a different aspect. And then I did a very short, like a 1-year stint as a junior PI at a multiple sclerosis center. And since then, I've been an editor at what is now Springer Nature. We were originally called the Nature Publishing Group, but we've merged with Springer. So we're now one of the largest publishers of academic books and journals. And yeah, I've been an editor since for the last six years plus. And my job is to think about science most of the day, think about what exciting developments there are that we want to publish or highlight in the journal. I basically just handle manuscripts that either come in or that we invite from going to conferences and talking to scientists, and you know, if it's work that's not published yet, or that once in a while that we see on bioRxiv, and then handling all aspects of publication. So from first determining if the paper goes out to review, to handling the peer review process, making decisions, talking to scientists about revisions, deciding whether a paper should be highlighted with a press release, with a commentary, inviting a commentary, all of those things. Yeah, and that's it.
Thank you, Irene. So yeah, it's pretty much like the other side, kind of behind the curtain of what happens with all the publishing, right? That we're also familiar with. Right. Yeah, thank you all so much for being here. I'm really excited to have a conversation with you all because I came up, you know, through the academy, but I have since left. So I'm really curious to hear about all of y'all's careers. So I guess the first question that I wanna ask is, what challenges have you faced in your careers that you feel like your peers may not have experienced or didn't experience, right? Because when I was a grad student, all I really knew about was like, I'm a woman in science, and you know, my field is male dominated. A lot of science fields are male dominated. And so a lot of the things that happened to me, that there were these negative experiences that were happening, I thought, you know, oh, it's because I'm a woman in science. But at some point, and it was when I started taking some sociology classes, you know, without my advisor's knowledge, that I started auditing, that I started, you know, I took a race and ethnic relations class, and I was like, oh my God, like, wait, there might be another aspect to this because of my ethnicity. And then I started looking around, and I was like, wow, like the white women in my program who are students, they're not experiencing even the same negative experiences that I'm going through. And so there's this other aspect of it that doesn't just have to do with being a woman in science. So I'm wondering, what challenges have y'all faced that you feel like your peers have not had to experience? Tracy, you are in academia. You're still in academia, and you're also in this like administrative position or different positions, right? Can we start with you?
Sure. I think one of the challenges is simply the extra workload. I mean, one of the wonderful things about being a scientist of color is that because of my kind of background and perspective, I know that I have the ability to make a particular kind of impact, particularly on students who don't see a lot of representation. So that is something I love about being a faculty member. But there is also that element in which being at an institution that talks about their values of inclusion, there is this desire for representation. And that representation means that people may not want you to be part of what they're doing. And so for scientists of color, there's kind of the over ask, where there's a constant pull to be involved in a lot. Meanwhile, our colleagues we're all being evaluated under the same criteria. And so even with this additional set of responsibilities, in the end, the evaluation process in most places is really as if everybody has the same demands on their time. So that is one of the things that I think is a particular challenge for scientists of color. So I think it can kind of be summarized as the challenge of trying to remind yourself of what your values are, regardless of all of the noise of what other people's values are that they're trying to drag you into or pull you into. Learning how to balance, which is kind of a lifelong task, and learning how and when to say no. So I'd say those are the challenges that are I think particularly pronounced for scientists of color.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for mentioning that, because that's like that points to a systemic issue, right? Because like the higher up you go, the fewer marginalized people there are, and so the fewer of us who are, you know, available to like do this kind of work. And the thing is, like it's like you're saying, where everybody's going to be evaluated by certain criteria. When you look at the tenure process, for example, right? We're not asking people, even if we ask people for diversity statements, you know, quote unquote diversity, are we putting as much value on that as the other parts of the tenure packet, right? And things like that. And so that's a really important point, because I feel like oftentimes marginalized people are being asked to kind of like fix problems that like we didn't create, and to be the face, right? To show that like, you know, there is diversity here, right?
And in some cases, the institutions have not put their commitment behind it in order, but nonetheless, there are folks who are doing the work. And what's interesting is that, you know, in order to have the most legitimate voice at the table, you have to have credibility as a scholar. But at the same time, the credibility as a scholar requires a certain amount of time that is often kind of being divided in many ways. So it's a bit of a catch-22, but I think you articulated it very well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. Rhonda, do you, can we go over to you? What are the challenges that you've seen that you feel like your peers don't have?
Sure. And I think that the experience may be a little bit different in the corporate world, but definitely challenges exist there, because you're not just working within your company, but you're working with clients outside. So you have people from many different places who may not have the same backgrounds or cultural experiences that you may face. And I think some of the challenges that I've faced are, you know, specifically about feeling the need to, especially if your workplace is not necessarily robust with people of color, is feeling the need to be representative for all people of color. So it's a bit of a challenge to, you know, feel that you're doing enough. And I know that I get myself caught sometimes in the sort of position of where I must be doing more than everyone else. And I know that is something that also has been quite ingrained in people from graduate programs, also coming from medical fields. I have had friends who say, you know, you always have to do a little bit more to sort of feel like you're proving yourself. I feel though, as I get a little bit more progressed in my career, luckily I have the opportunity to rely on some other facets of what I bring to the table. Make sure that people are, you know, aware of the challenges. I feel more free to speak about it, actually, with management. We have, I think we've had an understanding over many years that in order to breed diversity and the kind of conversations and the kind of solutions that our clients want to see, they have to have a variation of opinion, and that comes from people with many different backgrounds. You all can't be the same, right? So the company culture is definitely important. And I think my company definitely is in the direction of making sure that people on management are aware of this, and also people of color are in management. So, you know, that whether it be of color, LGBTQ, all these different things that bring diversity to the opinions and understanding of what makes a good workplace culture, and also what brings value to our clients, is really important. And what I've seen change as I've progressed in my career.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. Like I also work with clients like as a consultant, right? And it's kind of a, you know, a crapshoot or like a wild card depending on like what client you work with and like what challenges you're gonna, you know what I mean? Like it's always, it's like there's within your company, right? And you have to navigate all of that. And like you said, like as you become more senior, you become more comfortable speaking out because you have a higher level position and people take you more seriously, right? And then it's also like leveraging that position to make sure that other people are being heard and being brought up into management and stuff like that. And then there's that, and then there's also managing the client side as well, right? And having to deal with clients that may or, you know, may not necessarily see the value in that, right? But also it's like what, you know, as we go further in time, and I see this in academia as well, you know, like every year the cohorts for new students are more and more diverse, right? And every year, like the clients that we're going to see, it's going to be more and more diverse, right? So it's important to like, to bring that to the table, right? And make sure everybody in the company knows like how valuable that is, right? So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Tepring, would you like to go next? What are some of the challenges that you see in your field, in your area, that you see that other peers don't have to deal with?
Yeah. So I guess, you know, being at the intersection of race and gender and socioeconomic status and, you know, Californian, I think that, and, you know, divorced parents, things like that. So I feel like there have been challenges throughout my life, and being a high achieving academic, you learn to navigate it. I think you use the vocabulary word navigate, and that's exactly right. So you navigate, you know, people, you know, thinking that you're there to deliver coffee, and people thinking, I was computer science major to start, and people thinking you know, you don't belong, and you gain insecurities along the way. You know, now I'm navigating, we promote to senior, and I'm navigating I don't feel like I should have to ask. And my male counterparts, they didn't ask, they were, you know, essentially given, or it was just their turn. And so now I've had to ask to promote, even though my skills and knowledge have demonstrated the same level of competency. Yeah. So I think those are all little challenges that come with being a professional that doesn't exactly look like all the other professionals in the building, or in society. And so those are things that you learn to navigate. You learn to, you know, avoid the rocky cliffs and take a deep breath when you're, you know, going underwater. And I think through all of that, well, there's so many challenges, and we could probably spend the entire time talking about things that brought me to tears and all the courses of all of my places of employment and volunteer service. I think the thing that I take with me is that I got myself here and I can get myself out, and I'm really learning to ask for help when I need it. And if I don't find it the first time, keep asking. And this past year, I'm really I'm giving myself grace. I'm allowing myself the opportunity to rise above things, even if maybe I didn't feel like I deserved that forgiveness of that mistake, or I didn't do something timely enough. I give myself grace, and I give other people grace, because, you know, it's not always malintent. It's just sort of how our culture has been created. And it's going to take a lot of effort and thoughtfulness, and engagement, and listening to really change these factors. Because yes, we end up being representative of our entire race and gender. We end up, you know, not being scrutinized more for mistakes. We get challenged when speaking. We get dismissed more often. Those are sort of universal challenges that women, and particularly women of color, face. And just giving that moment of pause and grace has really helped me overcome some of those challenges.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, because one of the points that I wanted to make is that, like, you know, the culture needs to change, period, right? Like this is, and all of these different fields of science, right? It's like, it's a microcosm of the entire society, right? Like a lot of fields, a lot of scientists that I work with are like, they like swear that they're like not biased because they're scientists, right? But it's like, no, it's the people doing the science that were brought up in the same culture that like the rest of society is part of, right? And there is no escaping that. And so it's like, there's this aspect of like that culture needs to change and we need to do what we can to change it. And at the same time, like while that is changing, we have to navigate that, right? Like we have to, we still have to be here while it's changing, right? And we have to do these little things. And for me, it's like a lot of therapy. I go to therapy once a week, individual. I go to couples counseling. I've been to group therapy. I tell all the students I work with, I'm like, find yourself a therapist of color who can help you navigate, because it is a lot. And then a lot of, it's like you said, you know, you kind of absorb these insecurities along the way because there's this systemic culture that is like saying in so many different ways, like you're not enough or you're not good enough and whatever, right? And like that is really, it's really hard to unlearn that, right? And so it's like, you know, when we talk, for example, like imposter phenomenon, a lot of times we talk about it in the sense of like, oh, you have imposter phenomenon, well, you need to get rid of it, right? As like an individual problem, rather than like, it's the environment that's creating this or fomenting this, these imposter thoughts, right? So yeah, I really appreciate you talking about that, especially like giving yourself grace, like self-compassion and stuff, because like, you know, all of these different paths, like it's hard to kind of allow yourself and be like, people make mistakes and it's okay. And you know what I mean? So that's really helpful. Thank you, Tepring. And Irene, I'd love to hear from you about some of the challenges that you face that you feel like your peers haven't had to face.
You know, it's hard for me to say, to be honest, what things I've had to face that others haven't, because I think it's difficult for me to untangle my own insecurities and the way that I present myself, on occasion my lack of self-confidence and the fact that I'm a woman, from, you know, the way somebody else might present themselves and what the consequences of that are. You know, some things then I think, oh, these are just my personality traits that make me seem, you know, weak, or somebody you can take advantage of, or somebody who doesn't need to be promoted, versus, well, I'm a foreigner, I'm a woman, I'm petite, you know, I'm short, and I look, so it's hard for me to say what causes what. A lot of the time I'm not perceived as a minority, I'm just perceived as, you know, a woman, which is, I guess, it's certainly in some cases a disadvantage. But when I think of things that I've had to face in my career that others haven't had to face, the first thing I always think of is having to get a green card. And yeah. I know this is kind of a different nature than the other things that everybody has been commenting on, but it was by far the biggest hurdle in getting started with a career, because when you're a PhD student in the US, no problem. You know, you come in with a student visa, it's given to you. I had to extend it in the last year, crossed the border to Canada, did it, came back, no problem. At least for me, I'm from Argentina, so with my country, that was fine. And then for a postdoc, I also had no issues at all getting an academic visa. But when you want to get a job in this country, it's very, very difficult if you don't have a green card. And it was a huge hurdle that most people that I work with here didn't have to face. Some companies used to sponsor it. I think now it's getting more and more rare that will happen, especially when you're starting a career. So if you're very senior and you can show that they could not do without you, then they will sponsor a green card for you or an outstanding visa. But when you are getting your first step out of academia, it's very, very hard. The job market will just not make room for people that don't have that, because it costs so much for them. It's a big commitment. They have legal fees and everything like that. So that was a huge hurdle. And I'm sure that there's a lot of PhD students and postdocs in the US who are held back because they can't figure out how to get one. So I don't know how much more to say about that. I got mine many years ago. And so I think things have changed now too in the way that immigrants are perceived in this country. Although I live in New York, so I'm lucky, you know, here we're still very much welcome. But when you're looking for a job, I think that can be a really big hurdle. So anyway, I'm happy to talk more about that, but I don't want to just kind of go off, because then you get down into the weeds of how to go about it. And it was certainly a huge hurdle. And I feel for everybody in that situation. And, you know, I'm happy here, obviously, but yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up, because that's another, I feel like that's another, you know, axis of like marginalization that doesn't often get talked about, because, you know, there is an immigration process and it's not easy. And, you know, there's like, it's like you were talking about, like, if you want to get a green card, if you want to like, which is a permanent residency, right, in the US, so that you can have the right to work. Because some visas, like if you come with your spouse, you're not allowed to work. And so like literally anything, like, and they could, if you do, it could jeopardize your visa status. You could be, you know, deported back to your home country. There's so many layers of it, especially like, and it's especially important to talk about now when we're in this climate of like, you know, political unrest. There's a lot of talk about immigration and borders. You know, the administration just expanded its Muslim ban. So there's like there's so many things that comes along with that. I personally I came into the US as I'm from Chile. So I came into the US as a permanent resident, but to get my citizenship, that was like a whole other layer, right? And so there is this aspect of immigration that a lot of people don't have to deal with, and like we don't really see the obstacles that are in the way. And when you're just, all you're trying to do is you're just trying to work, and you're just trying to live, you know, in the country of your choice, and it is a real challenge for sure. So I think
Nicole, I'd like to just co-sign on Irene on that, because I am going through the process now. So I totally get where you're coming from, and you know, getting your foot in the door is sometimes the hardest part with getting a career. I know you said that, you know, the process may be getting a little bit more difficult now, but it really depends on the field. I think certain fields are seeing value of people from different places. And yes, the work is a lot more of a load, you know, paperwork, doing all of the process. I actually left the country with my company for 2 years. I lived in London. So in order to kind of maintain a job, because, you know, H-1Bs didn't work out or something like that. But, you know, it's definitely, you know, it's great to hear that somebody went through the process successfully and is doing well. So I just wanted to like co-sign on that really quickly.
Yeah. And I think it's like, that's really hard. I mean, I don't know if, I can't even imagine like, okay, like leaving my life behind, I'm going to go move to a totally different country just so that I can continue to work. You know, that's a huge deal. And just so that you can like come back and then go through the process again, it's a lot. And I just want to, you know, solidarity with y'all on that for sure. And I think you bring something up really important, Rhonda, because you said, you know, it's good to hear from someone who's been through the process and been successful, right? Because a lot of these experiences can be really isolating. So I'm wondering if we can talk about, because we know like from the research that like, okay, so we have these really isolating experiences. We're in these spaces where at our level, there aren't a lot of us, you know, who look like us, or there are not a lot of marginalized people up here, right? And so it's like what we have to do in order to remain is to find counterspaces, right? Like a space where that counters all of the negative things that we experience, you know, like from these microaggressions to like harassment to like, you know, dealing with people maybe at the top who are like, they just don't see the value, right? So I wanted to ask y'all, what are the kinds of counterspaces that you've been able to find where you are at? So it could be, and a counterspace can be a relationship with a person. It can be like a literal physical space. It can be a virtual space. It could be like a mentorship or a friendship. It could be so many different things, but it's like, and even for me, when I was a graduate student taking these sociology classes, right? Like nothing to do with science, but it was a space where there were other people of color there, people of all different genders and disability status and everything. And we were having these discussions that were very close to my core values. So it was a space in which I could exist that was totally antithetical to what I was experiencing in my very white, very male department, right? And so, so Tracy, I want to bring it back to you. What are the counter spaces that you've been able to find either along your career or where you are now that helps you to remain where you are?
It's such an important thing to find. So I'm really glad you brought this up. For me in graduate school, one of the first examples of that is a group of graduate students, I think shortly before I started graduate school, started an organization called Scientists of Color. And so it was, I was at Berkeley for my PhD, and it spanned all of the science disciplines. So it meant that we could have a critical mass of people who, even in different departments, different units, were having similar experiences around being an academic at a high level, while kind of confronting some common challenges. And so that community was really powerful. And I think beyond that, I've found that I have a group of Black women who are academics. They're faculty at various institutions who we've been friends since graduate school. They were the people who were on my dissertation committee. And they're now faculty at different places, not in the sciences, but remarkably, we have very similar experiences. And so, you know, we talk frequently, we compare notes, we send each other drafts of emails like, is this crazy? Or
yes.
is this going to be okay if I send this email?
Yeah.
And so that's, and those are, you know, those are my people. So I never feel like I'm alone in this. I always feel like I've got my people. And then I think the third thing, which I don't think we do enough, is within my field, I've found a group of people, and they're not, you know, not surprisingly, they're not all scientists of color or women, but people who have the values that are similar to my values,
Yes.
and they get it. So that even when I'm in an academic space that feels very sort of, you know, white and male, I know that there are people in that academic and scientific space who I can think of as my people. And that makes a really kind of dampens the sense of isolation, even if I go to a meeting and I'm one of a very small number of Black scientists. So I think having those different kinds of spaces and recognizing what they each give you is something that is really, I found to be really important.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for bringing up that last group of people, because you're totally right? Like not all skinfolk are kinfolk, right? And there's so many, because I've encountered like a lot of actually in my field, men of color, personally, that it feels like, okay, this is going to be a supportive person, and then it turns out not supportive whatsoever, you know, maybe only looking out for their own careers and stuff like that. And that has been like even more disappointing, because like for me, I'm like, I expect this from maybe like white men in the field, but I don't expect it from people who look like me, people who are supposed to be my people. So like, it's super important. I love that you have both your like sisterhood, right? You know, with the other Black women that you can like, you know, confer with, but then you also have people that are in your spaces who have the similar values, right? Because then it's like, that's really what's important is to have people that you know who get it, that you can talk to them about these things, even if they don't have the same experience, and they can, you know, validate you, right?
Yeah, and I think
so
sometimes you're in those spaces when something happens, a micro or even macroaggression, it's awfully nice if there are people in that space who can say, wait a minute, and so that it doesn't always have to be me. And so I think those relationships have been really, I think, have been really powerful.
Yes, that's super important. Thank you so much. Rhonda, what about you? What are the counter spaces that you've found that have helped you continue?
So the first time I really like sought out alliances and allies was in graduate program. I had a bit of a difficult last few years, and you know, someone I did find was a great mentor. She wasn't my PI, she was somebody else. She wasn't on my committee, she was a PI to several of my friends in the program. And so she's a person I spoke to. She also happened to be West Indian. So, you know, to see her in that position and like find some commonalities, as you said, shared values was really important. And she spoke very bluntly to me, even when I thought, you know, like, I disagree with this. And she'd be like, well, maybe think again. You know, so somebody to be honest with you, not just always, you know, be a yes man or agree with things that you say. So that was my first experience. And then in my field, I've actually, because there is a limited number of people, you know, it's important to reach out to people, especially when they join or they've been there, taking yourself out of your comfort zone to speak to people, see if that connection exists. And as you said, it's not everyone who looks like you will be there for you, but, you know, feeling the field out, seeing what works. You know, there's some, my company has a lot of British people, and there's like a few British men who I actually, that's part of my group, who advise me really well, who listen to what I say, and you wouldn't think at all we would have things in common like that. But, you know, I found some supportive people that way, and definitely have tried to bring on people in my position as being a manager and a mentor to bring up issues. If I notice someone is, you know, a little quieter in their position and I know they want to speak and I can tell, I'll have a conversation where I'm saying, you know, you can talk up, take the opportunity in front here. I know you have a voice and you can share it. Do not be intimidated by this. I know this experience is different. You know, so really encouraging habits that will lead to success for them. Because we all came in, a lot of us came in the same way, being a little unknowing. So making sure that as you seek mentorship, you are getting mentees. So
yes, absolutely. Lifting as you climb. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with more. What about you, Tepring? What are the counter spaces that you found?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have a real good answer for that. I am a very social person, and I interact with a lot of people, but I have a good network, but I'm always growing it. I mean, now I have like 4 more ladies right here. So
exactly.
Yeah. I don't know yet. It's a good question.
Yeah, that's super real. And something to note is like counter spaces are like, we often don't know that we do have them. You know, I learned about this concept about 6 months ago when I was reading a paper by Maria Ong about like about women of color and counter spaces. And so I think it's probably something that you're involved with now, you know, whether that's be a mentoring relationship or a network or something that's kind of helped you along, that just kind of counters, you know, those negative experiences that you've had. Yes. So
there's a lot of support along the way. I just can't, you know, it's not just like one.
Not like a one thing. Yeah, I got you. What about you, Irene?
I think very similar to Tepring. I mean, I don't have, what I can point to is close friends that I have from grad school who went through the same experiences and went through similar experiences trying to get started in their careers and are still going through all that, and just being very open and supportive. And I think when you're with very close friends, there's the love factor, right? So they just love me and I love them, and so you just want the best for people, and it's in an incredibly genuine way. And so you tend to see their side much more than whatever their boss or their manager said to them. You're always on their side. And so yeah, I think my sort of network and counter space that's been most helpful has always been my close friends and you know, my sisters and my brother. So just people who just really care and have gone through, they can just really relate to similar experiences.
Yeah, that's super real. That's super real. And having those, sometimes those like family and friend networks close to you is important because it reminds you of like who you are, and it's very grounding, right? It brings you back like, oh yeah, I'm this person, I'm a whole person, and I'm connected to these roots, and I'm not just you know, XYZ, whatever my position is, whatever my role is or my career, for sure. So we have some questions from the audience that I wanted to get to. Let me see. Give me 1 second. So the first question that we have is, what were some strategies, thoughts, or ways that you've centered yourself in your journey to get through your career? Tepring talked about giving grace to yourself, but I would love to know everyone else's thoughts. So for me personally, I already mentioned, you know, therapy, you know, is something that has been super helpful for me. I struggled a lot with mental health when I was a graduate student because of undiagnosed, you know, anxiety, depression, that kind of thing. And that's something that's been super helpful for me, but I would love to hear from some of y'all. Irene, why don't we start with you? So this is, what are some strategies, thoughts, or ways through which you've centered yourself in your journey?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that it's a constant, you know, thing. It's something you have to remind yourself all the time to try to stay centered. I recently had kids in the last few years, and being centered and balanced is a huge challenge now. And just sort of having everything happen and continue to think of myself as a priority, at least to some extent.
Yeah.
Well, my career still matters, you know, of course I needed to pay the bills, but I still need to have work that is fulfilling, that's using my skills, that I still enjoy a lot. And I think that it's hard to answer that, because I think, you know, like I said, you're always working on it. Probably the thing that helps me the most is to try to ask myself, is this job still worth it? You know, for all the sacrifice one makes to drop off the kids and run to work and make meetings and work at night when, you know, kids are sick and things like that. And the way that I think through that is, what are the aspects of the job that I like the most? What do I like? How many of these things do I actually like to do? And try to be systematic through like the tasks that I do in any given day, and say, well, these I really don't like, these things I like more, and I'm going to try to do more of these. And I have a job where you can try to craft, you know, where you spend most of your time that way, if you can identify what you actually like. And I think there's so much time spent in your job where you're not really thinking about that. You're just doing what's coming at you, you know, just, well, there's all this that needs to happen, and I'm just going to do it as fast as I can, as well as I can. And then at the end of the day, many days I would just feel, you know, very dissatisfied. No, I just spent all day doing, you know, busy work, and not any of the things that I actually like thinking about science and talking to people, which I love to do. So just trying to be very mindful about the job itself. What is it that I do all day when I'm there? What is taking up my time, and what of that do I like, and how can I do more of that? So I don't know if that answers the question. Then other than that, the main thing that I try to do to cope is I try to exercise whenever I have a few minutes, because I think that just in a very practical way, even when you have like, you know, sadness or stress or anything like that, exercise is great advice, whatever, you go for a walk or whatever you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Rhonda, what about you?
So the nature of my work sometimes is like huge amounts of work at once. So oftentimes what I like to do, and especially since my work allows me to travel at times, is if I get to go on a cool trip, I'm going to take some days out after that. So taking time for yourself to really disconnect, because you can have a hard time thinking about yourself and centering yourself when you're still in the environment that the work is being done in. So a lot of times I like to just leave it and try to be offline and try to be away from those sort of distractions. Last year I kind of booked a last minute ticket and I went to Bali for 2 weeks, and I said,
wow,
you know, okay, I'm just like, we have a little break, I'm gone. You know, and every time I come back from a trip like that, I come back in a better mood, in a better, obviously, but in a better about how I want to be a better job, and how I want to do my job, so that I don't get necessarily to that level of stress where I feel a bit of escapism. because I do love what I do. So as Irene was saying, I do want to remind myself of the things I like and get back to the core of that. So for me, traveling is the biggest thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. Honestly, the research shows that it doesn't matter how long a vacation or a break is, in terms of like how rejuvenating it is. It actually matters more how much you disconnect from work. So a 2-day vacation where you're totally disconnected from work is a lot more rejuvenating than like a 1-week vacation where you're still semi-connected. So that's a really good point. Tracy, what about you? What are the things that keep you centered?
I was just taking notes on this rejuvenation study because I think that I need to do that. I would say very similar to what the other panelists have said, is to sort of remind yourself of what's important. You know, sometimes for me, if I step back and I say, what do I really think is important? And then M, is what I'm doing consistent with what I feel is important? And so, for example, and for those things that are important, be present for them. I have a son who's 12, and if somebody asks me what's important, clearly I'm going to, you know, I really feel like he is the most important person that I need to be attentive to. So then the question is, are my actions consistent with that? And so that's something that I've been really working on, is that when we spend time together, to be really present for it.
Right.
When I'm at a game, a sports game, to be present for that game as opposed to checking my email. So I think that's been helpful. Those reminders have been helpful in trying to remain centered. But it's a work in progress.
No, that's a really good point. Actually, I set an intention each year, and this year my intention is to be more present, and that's in a lot of ways. So like practicing mindfulness, so that I'm like able to like, you know, stop my thoughts from like, you know, going everywhere. A lot of times we spend time either ruminating about the past or worrying about the future, like what do I need to get done today and tomorrow, and like not really being focused, right? So I think that that's really important. And if you like that statistic about rejuvenating, you know, taking a break from, I have a book recommendation for you and for everyone, which is Rest. I think it's like why it's something about like why we do more when we work less or something like that. And it's by this scientist. I think he's like a neuroscientist, and he does this whole study on rest. We're running out of time, but we have one more question from the audience. So if we would, I'd love for us to very briefly try to answer this question. So the question is, as someone who's the first in her family to get a PhD, sometimes the gap between what my professional world is like versus the personal world can be jarring. Do any of you have a similar experience? How do you compromise between the two worlds? So this is something that I've experienced myself, and something that is really hard, I think, especially like as an immigrant, as like, you know, someone who comes from like a low income background and stuff. You know, one of the things that my family always pushed for was education, and like make sure that you get as much education as you can, and like even though that's like, you know, our achievement of our community and like our family and everything, it's also one of the things that maybe drives us apart sometimes, because there's like this idea like, you know, you're too good for us now, or there's all these like jokes and stuff, and like it can be hard because, you know, you bring back ideas to this very traditional, right, like atmosphere that, you know, we didn't really have when I was growing up, and so that can be very, very difficult to navigate. So would any of y'all like to take a stab at this question? And I'd love for all of us, if all of us have like a response to this, can you keep it very brief as well, concise as much as we can?
I have something very quick, which is it's very difficult, but to try to find ways to merge the worlds, and different people will do that in different ways. but even bringing family into your work environment and bringing work environment into your family community, finding ways to do that kind of eliminates the barrier a bit.
Yes, absolutely.
But it's hard.
Yeah.
So I'll jump in briefly. So in a lot of ways, I have a very traditional marriage. I don't drive. I do the cooking. He takes out the garbage, kind of things like that. He's a police officer, police sergeant. And I think exactly what Tracy said is that I've merged my life together. So the things that I do in my world, we talk about at the dinner table. And the things that he does in his world, you know, very different than the lived experience I've had. And I try to make it a whole life aspect. So not a work-life balance, but a working life. And that's really helped me kind of shore up the gap between this is my home life and this is my work life. They're really sort of seamlessly together. And that makes sense because when we have something at home that's bugging us, it spills into our work. And when we have something at work that's bugging us, it spills into our home life. So we really have to pay attention and be thoughtful about those lives. This is our one and only life. So there's not really a separation. We have to learn how to make them the same.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And I can jump in really quickly. I've made myself open to any kind of questions and queries that come from my family and extended family because of the nature of the field that we work in, which is about healthcare and drugs. They're going to have questions. So I can serve as a bit of an expert and then like direct them on the right way. So it gets them thinking about what I do as well. So hopefully they can explain what I do and then also use me as a resource. So I think that makes the connection still live, you know, close by.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't have too much to add. I mean, I think my strategy has been, although my family is, my dad is educated, and I think my main way is just to share the things that have been exciting since my very first scientific discoveries that were really teeny tiny, but it got me so happy and interested in science. I would just try to explain what had happened, and then I saw the band come up on the gel, you know, and that I think over almost 20 years has just connected us. So
yeah, that's so wonderful. Well, that was a perfect timing because we're actually coming up to the end of the webinar. I'd love to thank the panelists once again for being here and for sharing of your time and everything. This has been like a really great conversation to have. And like one of y'all said, like we have 4 more people to add to our network for a nice Counterspace. So I'd love to hand it back to Dean, who's going to close us out. But thank y'all so much for being here.
Thank you for moderating.
yeah.
All right, thank you so much to all our panelists and our moderator. Again, you'll be able to find their contact info here on the slides, which will be made available. And in the future, we have some more webinars for the National Science Policy Network coming up. The next one is February 20th. You can join the community, the National Science Policy Network, by going to the link down here below. And you can also participate in an upcoming international memo competition. So you can submit a policy memo, and the deadline for that is April 1st, 2020. That should not be. And there are also some professional development funds that are available through NSPN. So if you'd like to apply for that, the next round will be due April 1st. And that's all we have for you today. So thank you very much. Again, thanks to the panelists, thanks to our moderator, and we'll hope to see you at the next diversity webinar.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great meeting you. I didn't have my info, but if anybody wants to reach me, you can search me on Google. My email is right on Tracy, if you have any papers.
Yeah, I feel like this was such a great chance to meet you all. So thank you for including me.
Yeah, I feel the same. Thanks, and great job moderating, Nicole.
Absolutely.
Thank y'all. Thanks so much.
Good day to everyone.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.